Thank you very much. I'm Lisa Engelke. I've been with Synacor for about 6 years. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at Charter on the product team, working in TV everywhere. And so I'm going to talk about how do we make login easier while still protecting the password, still protecting the service providers and the content providers. So I'll start out with just a brief introduction on Synacor, give you a little bit of context on how we started, how we got to this point. So Synacor started back in 1998, and at that point we were really a portal and email company. So we had a lot of clients that were service providers. And so the idea was, set your home page to a charter.net or a CenturyLink.net, and then send your customers there to access things like email, my account, bill pay. So our Cloud ID product really started as a login for email, portal, bill pay, those types of things. And we still do all of those things today, but we've really grown and shifted into a platform company, and we've spent a lot of focus on TV everywhere, and also have grown to service not only providers like AT&T and Dish and others, but also we play on the content provider side. So our clients are people like HBO and Cheddar as well. So if you watched any of the Game of Thrones madness, then you actually used a Synacor product. We handle all of their authentication and authorization in the US. So this is kind of how we got to this point. So we're really trying to think of solutions that are easy for the end user, but serve our clients, so our service providers and content providers. So what problems are we addressing and what problems are we talking about? So there's a few different ones. On the service provider side and the content provider side, they're of course worried about password sharing. They're also worried about just the identity platform in general from a standpoint of reliability and security, as well as cost. So it's a buy versus build for many of them. Do they want to build this in-house, or would they prefer to go to a third party? We've found that often it's a space in identity that is pretty complex, and there aren't a lot of authentication experts just kind of roaming around. So a lot of times they will go to a third party because there's more expertise there and a little more security and reliability. On the user side, users are still finding that login may be difficult. They still may not even fully understand TV everywhere. We still see that when we look at different studies on TV everywhere. And then TV everywhere usage is just not quite as high as expected. So I have a few stats that I'll share with you that actually show the TV everywhere usage has actually dropped from the previous year. This is from a CTAM TV everywhere tracking study. So CTAM is a kind of a consortium of cable and telecom companies that get together. They discuss common issues, things that impact their industries, and how to market things, especially things like TV everywhere. So they do this study every year, and you can see that numbers have actually fallen. So the darker gray shows the latter part of 2017 versus 2018. So actually a drop in TV everywhere usage. This slide really talks about, so if you went out and you tried to watch TV everywhere, did you end up watching it? Were you successful? So 68% say yes, they did end up viewing TV everywhere. 32% say no, and so then it's a question of, well, why not? Why were you turned away? Why did you not end up watching that TV everywhere content? So there's a few different reasons, but part of it is, the process was too difficult or time consuming. That's 17%. Problem with viewing, didn't know how to find the show. There's some confusion. Was asked to sign in, but didn't have a username and password. Didn't accept my username and password. So the username and password is always still a problem. Does the person even know what their username and password is for their service provider? They may have set it up for billing years ago, and then when they get into TV everywhere, they're excited to watch March Madness or Game of Thrones, wherever it may be. They get to that login screen and they don't know their username and password. Other problems that we're going to share and talk about, of course, password sharing. So this talks about, have you ever given your login information away? So It is pretty prevalent, both to give and to receive. So this is showing, ages 18 to 34, that's a much higher group. So younger people are definitely more prone to give away their login as well as to use a login from someone else. The numbers in green, all of those are numbers that are significantly higher and up. So even overall, when you look at the age group from 18 to 64, 17% of users say they have given a login to a family member living somewhere else temporarily. The next group is a family member living somewhere else permanently. So, possibly a millennial that has moved out and is just using a TV Everywhere password from mom and dad so that they never have to purchase services. And then the 15%, is a friend or a family member, and then finally a friend. But you can see that there is a lot of sharing. This slide shows if these respondents have used a login from someone else. So have you actually used a login from a family member or friend? And you can see the numbers again, much higher, 18 to 34, but it is certainly a growing problem and something that we want to address. Password sharing, one last slide on this, and this one is just showing what's the frequency of you using someone else's login. So it's pretty high, I think, every day. I'm using this login every day or a few times a week, every week, those first few. So to me, that tells me that is probably a cord never. That's probably someone who is using someone else's login as their main service, and they're just never going to buy that TV service, but they're getting the content that they want because they're not being stopped from sharing passwords. So what are we doing about it? So what are some of the solutions, that we've seen work, and what are we trying to do about addressing those problems? So really, for us, it's all about the balance. So if you ask the end user, they never want to log in. So one of the stats we have is 64% of current TV Everywhere users say that TVE is harder to use than other online sources. So maybe something like a Netflix. 53% say that they prefer sources that don't ask for login. So of course, a user never wants to log in. They want it to be completely seamless. But on the other side, we certainly want to protect the content. And so, it's estimated that password sharing will actually be upwards of a $10 billion problem by 2021. So that's some research from Bloomberg and research firm Parks Associates. Basically, that's people that never sign up for service and the impact that it has because of the password sharing. And as we talked about already, the password sharing is widespread. So what solutions can we come up with that still deliver a great user experience while protecting the content? And the first one I'm going to talk about is what we call forever login with device management. So it's really kind of two features in one. The forever login side of it is the user experience. So making that user experience easier. So typically if you're, let's say, watch ESPN or something on your phone, you usually have a time to live of 90 days, which means if you come back in within 90 days and you have the little remember me checked, then you usually don't have to log in again for 90 days. It's good. If you come in on day 91, you usually would be prompted for the typical username and password fields, which of course you may not know. It's a hurdle for the end user. With Forever Login, we're saying, this is a trusted device. We know who this user is. They've been in before. They've watched this content. We're going to check them as trusted. So the screen simply says success. You've been signed in. There's a little box you can check that says don't show me this again, and you can hit continue. So it essentially allows the user in an easier manner. They don't have to re-enter their login again because they've been trusted on this device. And the part that comes with it is the device management piece. So once you've been recognized as a trusted device, now as a user I can go into these screens and I can manage those devices and I can see the activity on those devices. And so in this case, I'm looking at the username on the left, the L. Smith, and I can see, Lisa's laptop, Ethan's iPad. It shows me when it was accessed. It shows me from where. And so this does a couple of things. For the end user, it certainly gives me visibility into my devices. If I see something that I don't recognize, it may be a red flag that this is fraud. If I see something in another country, something that's just way off, I can remove that device from the screen. And it may also be kind of an alert to me that I need to change my password. So there's some fraud protection there for the end user, as well as just visibility into the account. So this is what it would look like if I clicked onto one of the devices. I can rename the device. I can see the specific service. So this is, accessed at 4 in the morning, Nick Jr. in St. Louis, Missouri. So you really can see, what this user is doing at what point in time and what types of content they're accessing, whether it be, it could be email or it could be, Fox Sports or whatever the case may be. So the other part of it is, we want to add machine learning to this. So we really want to build a profile for the end user so that it starts to recognize, Troy is always accessing a certain type of content on this device, this type of device in this region of the country. And if something falls outside of that, it can be a red flag. Now that doesn't mean that we necessarily would lock him out, but we can start to enable different hurdles, if you will, for that end user. So if we see something that looks fishy, then maybe we turn the forever login off so that the user actually has to log in. Or maybe we add a secret question and answer. Something to make sure we're correctly identifying the end user so that we know it's the right person getting the content. But it's all about starting to recognize and scoring the user profile so that we can acknowledge and recognize when something is out of the ordinary. The other thing we're doing with this is allowing our service provider clients to have an API that can actually remove devices once a certain threshold is met. Like if I were to share my credentials with 500 of my closest friends on Facebook, it's going to hit a level where the service provider is saying, that's password sharing. There's too much usage on this username and password. They can fire off one of our APIs to remove devices at a certain level. So the next thing that we've done is home-based authentication. So this is really for service providers that have a double play. So there's no login needed at all. All of the TV Everywhere authorizations happen on the back end. So the user is in the home. We do an IP lookup, tie it to an account number, and can see TV Everywhere entitlements. And so the user never has to enter a username and password. So they're in the home. They would bring up something like, March Madness, and we would behind the scenes in real time do that entitlements check to say, does this user have TBS? Are they allowed to view this? And they would just get a little message that says, congratulations, since you're in the home, you are allowed to view this content. And so this has obviously been a huge win from the standpoint of really dropping abandonment rates. They've gone from, upwards of 50% down to under 10% for some of our clients. We also worked with Apple to help create Apple single sign-on. So you may have seen this. Before this was in place, users would have to enter their username and password over and over and over again. So if you bought an Apple TV and you were all excited, you want to set it up, you set up HBO Go, you have to go out to another browser window, pair the device with a PIN number, then enter your username and password, take a deep breath, and do that over and over and over again for Watch ESPN and TBS and all of the other TV Everywhere apps that you may want. So with this functionality, we can share the username and password, the single sign-on, through the keychain and actually allow the user to have single sign-on. Once we know who they are once, they can basically hit continue and allow themselves to enter without showing the username and password over and over and over again. So this just shows, in 2018 we had about 300,000 daily Apple single sign-ons just from our clients. And so it has been successful. It is something that users are engaged with, and certainly something that makes it much easier. Social login, so you can make login a little bit easier by tying it to Facebook or Google account. Amazon is something we're working with as well. So you can tie it to one of the social logins so that the next time the user comes in, they don't have to remember the service provider login. They can log in with Facebook or the social media of their choice. So we can also make the experience easier with QR codes and device activation. It can be either scanning the QR code or entering a PIN. We can also tie it in with Touch ID to make the login even more seamless. So it's really all about just kind of pulling in all of these different features and utilizing them for the end user so that their login is a much more seamless experience. So this is just showing that, if the user didn't want to use the QR codes, we can still support and deliver the PIN method to connect the device. One of the other things, that we talk a lot about with our clients is just making sure there's very easy to use self-service tools. And so some of our clients still, don't have necessarily all of the very easy to use password resets, account recovery, those types of things. And so, we try to help them with that, making them very straightforward, using things like secret questions and answers to recover your files or recover your accounts so that the end user can do this themselves. So it's not always picking up the phone and calling support just to reset a password. So that is pretty much my presentation. If there's anything else you want to learn, you can certainly contact us. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good.
All right, who's got a question about password protection or easy sign-on? Who's got one? What if I said no prize until someone coughs up a question? I'm sure you have a good question for her.
I work with her, so.
I know. I know.
Be a softball. He's got one.
Are you working with the IT folks
Sure.
outside of this industry? So is it the same kind of mechanism that you're employing elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. You mean, are we working with like IT teams at the service provider and content provider levels?
Could
Or
even
just
regular enterprise, like
Sure.
It'll save the IT staff some cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, that's a big part of our sales pitch when we're talking to them. And for some service providers in particular, and content providers, I mean, HBO had previously done, all of this in-house and then moved it over. It is definitely about saving your own resources. And, if you can save your own IT staff from doing this kind of thing, they can focus on new products and other things. And that is absolutely kind of part of our pitch. And even, retiring old legacy identity stacks as well, so your IT team doesn't have to maintain them, but moving into the cloud for these types of services.
So that's commonality, but what are the differences that you can focus on our space?
The differences on,
So it's a regular enterprise, some engineering office staff says, I lost my password, and you go through that process. But in our realm, entertainment services and all that, what's kind of unique on our end that you guys deal with that isn't on the regular IT end?
what is unique on our identity stack that we deal with
Just the
on.
general, issue of revalidating. Is it any different than
Oh.
somebody losing their office password?
Well, I think it's just, it depends on the client, but in a lot of cases, it will be something like you identify yourself with an account number or a PIN that's on your bill, that type of thing. It does depend on the client. If we're handling, login from the creation, there is at some step, some validation, you're entering in an entry field based on what the client wants it to be. So.
All right, how about a round of applause for Lisa from Synacor?
Thank you.
She did a great job.